How old are we? Why did we decide to come to Spain? Can Craig speak Spanish for 10 seconds?
Ooh.
What are the differences between English and Irish people? We answer all these questions and more in our 200th episode of
Aprender inglés con Reza y Craig. Hello, my name's Craig.
Hi, I'm Reza.
And with over 45 years of teaching and over 4 years of podcasting between us and 200 podcast episodes, we'll help you improve your English and take it to the next level. Welcome to our 200th episode. How are you doing, Reza?
Well, Craig, I think I'm slightly better off than you at the minute. Neither of us are feeling that great today.
Yeah, we've got sore throats. I'm recovering from bronchitis, so that's why my voice sounds very raspy and croaky. But we must do this episode for you because we're so happy to be celebrating our 200th episode. And we've got lots of questions from lovely listeners who have sent in their general questions, nothing to do with English today. What's the first question?
Well, let's kick off. And that pun is intended. I'm fooling about with words. Let's kick off with a voice message from Marcos Forgiarini.
Hi Reza, hi Craig, how's it going? This is Marcos from Argentina, and this is my message for your 200 episode. Well, what do you think about Russia and the Football World Cup that will take place there this year? That's all. Bye.
Well, thank you, Marcos. Yes, the World Cup is taking place this year in Russia from June the 14th to July the 15th. Are you interested in the World Cup, Reza?
Yes, I am, Marcus. I'm always interested in the World Cup. I think it's fair to say that neither Craig nor I are huge football fans. But I am interested in the World Cup always. What about you, Craig?
Yeah, absolutely. My team from when I lived in the UK is Arsenal, and I still have an interest in Arsenal and Valencia, of course, because I live in Valencia. But I'm not a huge football fan, but I do love the World Cup. I did need to check that the last World Cup was won by Germany because I couldn't remember. And interestingly, the groups for the World Cup in Russia have been decided, and each group has a Spanish-speaking country. So there's a Spanish-speaking country in every group in the World Cup this year. So let me remind you or inform you of the groups in case you didn't know.
Can I just say something, Craig? In case you're listening to this sometime in the distant future, because our podcast becomes so popular that people listen to it for years to come, we better mention that this is 2018. This is 2018, because who knows, you might be listening to this in 2040, right? This is the 2018 World Cup.
Good point. And you know who's won. So if you are listening to this after July the 15th, you know who's won the World Cup in 2018. But Group A is Russia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Uruguay. So I'll be supporting Uruguay. Who's in Group B, Reza?
Group B, Portugal, Spain, Morocco, and Iran. An interesting group. Very interesting.
So, of course, I'll be behind Spain for that group.
Me too.
Group C has France, Australia, Peru, and Denmark. So I'll be supporting Peru.
And Group D, I think, Marcos, we can guess which team you might support is Argentina. You might possibly support them. Iceland, Croatia, and Nigeria.
I don't think Iceland will be a big problem for Argentina. It's actually Iceland's first appearance in a World Cup along with Panama. So Panama is also in the World Cup. So Panama and Iceland for the first time playing in the FIFA World Cup.
Yeah, but Marcos, don't be too complacent. Complacent means you think for sure you're going to win, because 2 years ago in the Euro Cup, Iceland eliminated England. people will remember. Nobody imagined that was going to happen. So, don't be complacent, Marcos. Play well if you want to beat them.
Yeah, but Argentina are much better than England. Anyway, Group E, we've got Brazil, Switzerland, Costa Rica, and Serbia. So, of course, we're going to be supporting Costa Rica in Group E.
I will be wearing my Love the Sloths t-shirt.
And eating pineapple.
Yes. I will have a most slothful day. Un día perezoso.
Who's in Group F?
In Group F, we've got the defending champions, Germany, who are always good, as everybody knows. Mexico, who can be a very dangerous team as well. Sweden can be good. And South Korea have played well. I think that is going to be the best first round group. There are going to be some good matches in that group.
And I will be supporting Mexico, of course, but I'd also be happy if Sweden win, because I like Sweden, and I always like it when Germany lose. So apologies to any listeners from inside Germany, and apologies to Pilar from France, because I also enjoy seeing France lose when they play football. Apologies to our French supporters.
Oh, Pilar, by the way, that's Craig speaking understandably because he is English. And we'll be talking later about the differences between the English and the Irish. The Irish haven't got a problem with the French, but England do. England do.
Only when sports are concerned.
Do you know what? In that group, I would quite like to see South Korea do well. Simply because they're the underdogs. The underdogs, that's the team that nobody expects to win. Although they have won some important matches, but you think, no, they're not going to. I always like to give support to the underdog, personally.
So who do you think is the underdog in the final group, Group H? We've got Poland, Senegal, Colombia, and Japan.
For me, the underdog there is probably Senegal. But they can be good. They have flashes of glory.
Yeah, I agree. But of course, in Group H, I will be supporting Colombia. So good luck to your country, your team in the World Cup. And Marcos, thank you for your question.
The next question comes from Marcelo Fernandez, and he has written, please tell us more about the music in the podcast. Was it chosen among a wide variety of songs? Was it designed just for the show? What was the selection process like? He's talking about when Craig says,
at the end of each podcast, the music in this podcast is by Pitts, P-I-T-X. The track is called See You Later. Now, we've had this music from the very beginning. Do you remember, Reza, how we chose it?
I do, yes.
So, Marcelo, to choose the music, we actually selected some tracks and some music that were all Creative Commons, which means that legally we could use the music if we credited the artist, which we do every podcast. And we sat down before we recorded the first episode and we listened to a selection of music. And we just discussed what we liked, what we didn't like. And I think we pretty much agreed it came down to 2 or 3. To come down to means to finally have a small selection. There was a short list of 2 or 3 tracks, and then we chose the one that we use. Do you still like it?
Yes, I do.
I mean, you're happy keeping it? Because
yes.
A couple of times it's crossed my mind, which means I've thought about maybe changing it for something different.
Personally, I wouldn't like to change it. I think it really suits us. If something suits you, the verb to suit, it means it's appropriate for that particular use. Because I find it fresh and quirky. Mm-hmm. Now, the word quirky means a little bit different from time to time, unexpected. I find it quirky, and I like to think that we're sometimes quirky. So it kind of suits us. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I'm quite happy with it. And you've probably noticed, if you're a regular listener, that sometimes in the podcast between sections or to give a short break when we transition or change from one subject to another subject, there's a very short piece of music for a couple of seconds, maybe 3 or 4 seconds. That music is bought music. We pay for that music, And if you're creating podcasts or you're interested in where we get that music from, there are some links in the show notes at inglespodcast.com/200. And we get them from websites like audiojungle.net and neosounds.com, which I really like, and ccmixter.org, which is a website that has a lot of Creative Commons music on it. So a lot of the music we buy, and it costs maybe $15 or $12 for a short piece of music for 15 seconds. And then I put that in the podcast to make a break during the episode.
Let's go on to another question. This time it's a voice message from Leo, or Leo, depending on if you want to pronounce it the English or the Spanish way. Leo or Leo from Uruguay.
Hi Craig, hi Reza. This is Leo from Uruguay. I started to listen to your podcast more or less 1 month ago when I decided to improve my English and gain some fluency. So sorry for my current English. Just as you asked on the last podcast, I'm not going to ask you about grammar. So as an engineering student, my question for you guys is, do you like the computer world, or are you interested in topics like programming or someone else? Thank you very much for your work and take care. Bye.
Well, thanks, Leo. That was an interesting question. I really liked the expression gain some fluency that Leo used. He's been studying English to gain some fluency or get some fluency. Any comments on his message, Reza?
Yes, it's a very interesting question, Leo. Are we interested in, you mentioned computer programming and also the world of computers? I think you said the computer world, but it would be more typical perhaps to say the world of computers. We say the world of something, the world of music, the world of theatre, the world of work, the world of computers, for example. The short answer for me is yes and no. I'll go into that in detail. And what about you, Craig?
I'm very interested. In fact, I like to think of myself as a wannabe geek. A geek is, in Spanish, you might say freaky, someone who's interested in something unusual or someone who's very, very deep inside a theme or a subject. And a wannabe geek, because wannabe means you're not that, but you want to be. So I have aspirations, I have ambitions to be very knowledgeable about computers. I don't know how to program. I really admire people who know how to write programs and use different computing languages. That fascinates me. And I think I'm very lucky to have been brought up in a world that was analog. So when I was growing up in the UK, there was no YouTube, no Google, no email. We had 3 TV channels for most of my childhood. In fact, I can remember when there were 2 TV channels, BBC One and ITV, and that was it. So my childhood as a young man was very, very analog, although in the last 20, 30 years, there's been this incredibly fast change and acceleration in technology, which has fascinated me, and I love it, but I'm not very skilled in it. What about you, Reza?
I think Craig's being quite modest, Marcel. I think he is pretty skilled in the world of computers. I would say he knows quite a bit more than the average person.
Of my age, perhaps.
Oh, definitely. But even the average person of 10 or 20 years younger, possibly.
I'm not sure.
So I'm like Craig. I was brought up in the analog world as well. I remember getting my first computer and it didn't impress me in the least. I thought, what a pain in the neck, except for playing computer games or video games, as we call them then. I remember getting a ZX Spectrum computer in about 1981 or 2, and hardly anybody in my street had one. I was like a privileged one. But now,
why did you get it? Did your dad get it, or your brother, or was it bought for you? Or?
My parents bought it for all of us.
But you didn't. You weren't impressed. You didn't like it.
I liked the games on it, but programming in 1980 something, early 1980s was, a very painful, slow process. It took forever just to get, like a silly couple of pixels to move across a screen.
Do you remember playing ping, the table tennis game with the thing that moved from side to side?
Yeah, I actually wrote a couple of my own games, believe it or not. Now I wouldn't know how to program anything, but then I kind of got into it and learned how to program a ball going from one side to the other. I actually wrote the program. That ancient language of if x equals blah, 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 go to blah, 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 go sub 3/7 times. I actually did all that, but now I don't know how I did it.
And Leo, this might make you laugh because I'm sure you're younger than us, but I can remember in school having lessons in which we had cards that we punched binary code into. So it was the 0101 that we actually made holes in the card. And then these cards went into some kind of primitive computer. I didn't like that. I didn't understand it. And it took me a very, very long time to get to like computers. And I didn't become fascinated with them until I came to Spain. When I arrived in Spain in 1997, I didn't have an email address. My first email address was in 1998, and that's when I started looking at Microsoft Word. And then in 2001, I started La Mansión del Inglés at mansioningles.com, and some of you know where that went. But before the year 2000, I really had very little interest in technology.
Mm-hmm. I think, Leo, we're certainly both interested in computers. I don't know about actual computer programming. I, like most people, probably think as long as they can produce software that is useful for me, that's great. But how exactly they do it, I'm not that interested in, like most people. Mm-hmm. Just as long as they can do it.
Yeah, I like things that work. And I'm what's called a late adopter. You might know the word to adopt a child, for example. I'm a late adopter, which means when something new appears, I'm never the first person to try it. I like to wait and see if it's useful, if it works properly, if it's popular, and then maybe I'll start to use it. So I don't like jumping into things from the beginning. Next, we have a message from our friend Elisa from Finland. Congratulations to you and congratulations to me. You've done nearly 200 episodes and I've listened to them all, approximately 30 minutes per episode. Oh yes, it's a huge amount of time, lovely time. I really appreciate your work and commitment. That's from Elisa. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elisa. And yes, congratulations for putting up with us, for tolerating us for 200 episodes.
Congratulations to Elisa and to all our AIRC200 who have been listening to us for so long, and some of you who have joined our community recently and gone back to listen to us from the beginning, from episode number 1. Thank you for your patience and your time.
Don't worry if you become an AIRC200, that's AIRC. Because you can become what we call a functioning AIRC200. You can keep down a job, you can have a family and stuff, and the AIRC200ism will interfere a bit in your life, but won't completely ruin it. You'll be a functioning AIRC200.
Just to explain, if this is the first episode you're listening to, AIRC200, AIRC, is Aprender Inglés con Reza. That's the AIRC that we've put together with Oholic. So AIRC200 means that you are a huge fan of the show.
Hold on, you said Aprender Inglés con Reza, but you forgot about the Craig bit.
Oh, did I?
Yeah, you said con Reza. Don't be too modest.
Con Reza y Craig. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. What would I do without Reza?
I think you've learned a lot more from Craig, to be honest.
Next, we have a voice message from Lulu from Cancun, Mexico.
Hi, Greg and Reza. My name is Lulu from Cancun, Quintana Roo, Mexico. I want to ask you for your 200th episode of the podcast. How old are you, Greg and Reza? Thank you.
Reza, how old are you, mate?
At the moment, I'm 47, but you might be listening to this in the future. So I was born in 1970.
Just a child. Reza is just a child. I'm a little older. I was born on the 25th of May, 1963, which makes me 55 this year in 2018. So 55, my God, that sounds really old. So yeah, born in May, Gemini. What's your star sign?
Sagittarius.
And what are the typical traits or typical characteristics of a Sagittarius?
Talk too much.
No.
The sort of person who would be drawn to podcasting. What about your Gemini, right?
Yeah,
What about Gemini?
two people, double personality.
Ooh, are you a bit schizophrenic?
That's true, actually. I do think of myself as being two people. Yeah.
Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. The good Craig and the bad Craig.
I've only ever met the good one. I'm a bit frightened now that I might meet the bad one
You've
someday.
met the bad one as well.
Well, I met a slightly naughty one, but it wasn't that bad.
You've met the bad one over the years.
Lulu, can we just assure you of one thing? Craig is 53?
54 at the moment.
At the moment, I'm 47, but we look much younger, Lulu.
Yeah.
We look so much younger. If you saw us, you'd think, oh, these guys are what, 25, 28?
Yep. I look no more than 53. Oh, and we also had, speaking of ages, we also had a very interesting email and question from Gemma Monthon about ages. And Gemma, we do have your email and we will answer it next week because it's specifically about English. And we said that this episode, to celebrate, we're not going to speak about English. So we will answer your question. Pilar Martinez from Lyon.
Bonjour, Pilar.
Bonjour, Pilar. Comment ça va? What does Pilar say this week?
She writes, Hi, Craig and Reza. Your comments about my accent were very kind, thanks. I'll keep practicing. If you ever come to Lyon, I'll be happy to show you the city. And I could say that I've met you.
Well, the same here. If you come to Valencia, Pilar, please get in touch and we'd be happy to meet you.
Yeah, and that goes for any listener, by the way. If you're ever passing, let us know. By the way, she says, I would like to wish you very happy podcast number 200. Congratulations, best wishes, Pilar.
Well, thank you, Pilar.
Merci beaucoup.
Hello, Reza. Hello, Craig. This is Fernando from Madrid, another strong alcoholic. I'm glad to listen to your podcasts. Thank you so much and happy 200 podcasts. See you or hear you soon.
Hi, Reza and Greg. It's Olga from Russia again. I'd like to congratulate you on your coming podcast number 200. Thank you for the work that you do, and it would be cool if you could keep up this great thing forever. And I remember that you encouraged your listeners to ask personal questions. So I'd like to ask you some questions too. I'd like to ask you what made you become teachers? How did you choose this job and how did it affect your life in general? What do you like best about teaching? What do you like least about it? I would be really interested to listen to your answers. And thanks again for your podcast. Bye.
Thank you, Olga. That was a lovely message. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. And I was wondering what you do for a living. Are you a teacher? What's your profession? Anyway, Reza, what made you become a teacher?
Ooh, that's a good question. Well, Olga, as you know, Craig and I teach English and we do it abroad. We do it to foreigners. And for me, it was a mixture of having a curiosity about teaching, but perhaps, to be honest, even more so, the desire to travel. And I thought teaching English abroad gives me the chance to be abroad and earn a living. So I don't need to worry about financial problems.
But you do seem to enjoy it. So there must have been something in the beginning when you started. If that was the initial motivation, there must have been a moment where you thought, yeah, I like this. I'm interested in this.
Yeah. At the beginning, it was kind of experimental for me, but I just generally like the idea of education. I like the idea of learning things, actively trying to learn things. So I thought, well, let's try it from the other side. Why don't I try and teach people things? But Olga, since then, I've been to Spanish classes myself. I've also been to French classes. I like learning. I like kind of seeing the whole learning process from both sides. What about you, Craig? What got you originally interested in teaching?
I was working abroad and I had a friend who didn't speak English and he wanted to learn. And he wanted to learn because he was working with some Scandinavian girls who were very attractive. I think they were from Finland or Sweden.
Ah.
Have I told you this story?
No.
And he said, Craig, you have to teach me. You have to teach me some English. I want to speak to these girls. And I didn't know how to teach him my language. We found an old book, an old grammar book, and I used that over a period of 3 or 4 months to try to teach him some vocabulary and basic grammar. And he did learn some English, and he was able to speak to these attractive Scandinavian girls. But I was very frustrated and at the same time very happy that I had taught him something. So I went back to London. I took a course in teaching English as a second language, and I learned how to effectively teach my language to a speaker of another language. And that's how I started teaching.
Well, it was a very good thing that you were able to help your friend to meet these attractive ladies. But how altruistic, Craig. Didn't you think of teaching yourself how to speak a language so as you could meet foreign attractive ladies?
Swedish, for example.
Yeah. What about that?
Well, I have studied other languages, but I agree with what you said before, that in order to teach your mother tongue, I think it's very, very necessary to learn another language because you have to know the difficulties and the problems that people face when they're trying to learn another language. So it's very important to learn at least one other language. And Reza, how does teaching affect your life in general?
Well, I guess teaching, you get to meet a lot of people.
Yeah.
A lot of people. And I couldn't even imagine, couldn't calculate how many people I've met in the last 25 years teaching English. Certainly hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands.
Mm-hmm.
You know that. So I guess you meet a hell of a lot of people. That's one thing.
It's very social, isn't it? And I like that. And it's a double-edged sword. A double-edged sword means there's a good side and a bad side to it. The good side, you meet some lovely people. It's very social. You're face-to-face with people in the classroom, usually on a daily basis. But on the other hand, you have to walk into the classroom and smile. You have to be positive. You have to be motivating when you don't necessarily feel like it, because we don't always feel like happy and motivating. But sometimes you have to do that so that people learn.
It's a job that really is difficult when you're feeling tired.
Yeah.
And we all feel tired sometimes, particularly if you feel mentally tired. That makes teaching difficult. You have to just try to ignore your tiredness and try to focus, because your brain is basically there to be picked. That means people are looking for information until the class finishes, and that's very tiring.
Although very often I don't feel like going into the class. I feel tired. I just feel like going home and maybe watching a TV series. But when I go into the class, the students motivate me. I get energy from them. If they're motivated, if they want to learn, then they pick me up, which means they animate me. They give me energy.
Would you say then, Craig, what you like best about teaching is the meeting of new people?
Yeah, the contact with new people. I like the fact that it's not a 9-to-5 job. It's not a job that you go in at 9 o'clock in the morning and you work at a desk for 8 hours and then go home, because our hours change a lot. And I'm also very flexible because I sometimes work at home on the internet. So sometimes I'm in the classroom, sometimes I'm at the computer, sometimes I'm working in the morning, sometimes I'm working in the afternoon. And I like the variety of the job.
Mm-hmm.
What do you dislike about it?
Well, it's a terrible confession because it's a very important aspect of teaching, but I can get bored of corrections. I appreciate they have to be done.
Do you mean written corrections, writing?
Yeah, correcting pieces of writing or tests or whatever. It can be very time consuming and it can be very boring to see the same mistake repeated and repeated and repeated and repeated, and you see it 200 times in a day. It can be quite frustrating, but we understand that it has to be done. I mean, sometimes I create tests or homeworks which aren't obligatory. So I'm creating work for myself, correcting them, but I realize it has to be done. But let's be honest, it can be boring, can't it, Craig?
Yeah. Although that's not what I dislike the most. To answer Olga's question, the thing I least like about teaching is the salary.
Yeah.
The salary, the low pay, and also perhaps administration, because sometimes we have to do lots of administrative tasks connected to continuous assessment and the students register, especially if you teach children, which actually I don't, but there's a lot of administration connected to teaching younger students. So a lot of the administration is something I dislike also. Thanks for your question, Olga. Very interesting.
Craig, I tell you what, we've been in Russia. Why don't we move over to another continent? Let's go down to South America. Let's go to Paraguay.
Yes.
Where we have an email from Jose Alfredo Bordon.
Hello, Jose. Thank you for your question. And Jose says, thanks for your podcast. It's helping me a lot in improving my English. I listen to it every day in my commute to work. Better to say on my commute or during my commute to work, Jose. And to commute means to travel, usually from outside the city into the city for work. So a commuter travels by train or by car or by bus to get to work. Jose continues, you've mentioned that you are a big fan of technology. What do you think about all the improvements that are taking place in that field? For instance, artificial intelligence and the possibility that many current jobs could be automated by machines. What sort of concerns do you have about the topic? Also, there's a movement called transhumanist that states that we can overcome death in the future with the advances of technology in fields like ADN, which is DNA in English, DNA manipulation, which could extend life expectancy, or perhaps unloading your brain to a computer so that you can live virtually in it. I'm a bit worried about these subjects, says Jose. Well, what do you think? His first question, Reza, what do you think about artificial intelligence and the fact that many jobs are being automated?
Well, there are certainly some great advantages to the automation of some jobs. I'm thinking of, for example, on a car production line where robots or certain robotic elements can carry out with great precision and great speed and get great reliability some really important jobs which before were carried out less efficiently by humans. And so it cost them a lot more money to pay the human, and they didn't do it as well. So I guess that's helping to keep the price of cars down. So there can be economic benefits to the efficiency. That's for sure. However, I'm against the idea of automating jobs if the job's not going to be done as well. So as long as it's done as well or better, fine. But if it's not going to be done as well, then for me, that's not a move forward.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think, Craig?
Yeah, no, I agree. And to Jose's question, what concerns do you have about these advances? Well, I try not to worry about things I have no control over. If, for example, I have high blood pressure, then I can control that by eating healthier. So I can change my diet. I can control my physical problems. But where the advance of technology is concerned, I don't think I can influence that change. It's inevitable. You can't stop it. It's going to happen. So my attitude is to adapt to it, to accept it, and to live with it the best I can. yes, there's a problem with people losing their jobs, but I think we have to be creative. We have to accept the changes and try to adjust and adapt our lives so that we can use the advances in technology to live better and to try and use them to get maybe slightly different jobs staying in the same field. If a lot of people start learning English with computer programs, for example, and we're not needed in the classroom as often, we will still be needed for conversation. So you still need to speak to somebody to learn English. There's usually something you can do in your field that's a little different, but that you use alongside technology. And one other thing, I do sympathize with people who are not accepting technology. And I think of my sister when I think of people like that they're against it, that they're technophobes, they hate it, they can't accept, they don't use email, they can't use computers. I sympathize, I feel very sorry for these people because they are getting left behind. And I think some people of certain ages are being left behind by these advances. It's a shame.
Yes, I think there's a certain delicate age where people are kind of between the computer literate and computer illiterate generation. So nobody expects an 80-year-old to be very proficient in using computers, although some are, and some of them are a lot better than me. I'm the first to admit it. But you're not surprised when you hear an 80-year-old doesn't have an email account, doesn't have a Twitter, they don't even use WhatsApp. Plenty do, but plenty don't. Doesn't surprise me. However, people around about, late 50s or mid 50s to kind of 65, as we speak at this moment of time, but of course that will change. It's kind of a gray area. Should they be computer literate? Should they not be? And I don't know, maybe your sister falls in that area, that kind of age group where they're kind of at the edge. If they were 10 years older, they could get off without knowing anything about computers and no one would be surprised. But if they were 10 years younger, people think that they should know a bit more. She's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, but it's the attitude that affects me. For example, my sister's 63, and she does not want to know anything about computers. There's a wall there. She closes her ears. My dad is 86 and he tries to use his mobile phone. He sends me emails. It's really difficult for him because of his age, but he's trying, he's interested. And I find that accessibility or that desire to try to use technology very encouraging.
Another thing that Jose Alfredo mentioned was transhumanism, or I guess you're getting into the area there of cryogenics and things like that. The idea of your brain or your body or both being frozen or somehow kept so that they can later be reused. It could be via computer, or it could be simply by being deep frozen. Can you imagine your dad wanting his brain to be put onto a computer? Would he go for that?
I don't think so, no. I think he's quite happy when his time is up to just go quietly. But it's an interesting question. I mean, after we die, do we want some kind of a part of us to live on, maybe in the cloud? Would you like these podcasts to go on forever after we die, for example?
Can you imagine Craig and my head being frozen and eternally there in a jar so you can consult us about any question in the next 5,000 years?
But they wouldn't, because unfortunately we pay every month to host these podcasts on a podcast hosting platform. So, when both of us die, if nobody continues paying, then these podcasts will not be available, which is a shame. It would be really nice to keep these podcasts alive. There are a few websites and services that will keep you alive on the internet after you die, and I've listed them in the show notes over at inglespodcast.com/200. One's called Chronicle of Life, which is a data hosting service that continues after you die. Another is called Dead Social, which posts videos and texts and images and gives you some digital legacy after your death. And there's another one called Gone Not Gone, which you can use to send messages to your family and people you love on their anniversaries after you have passed away. The phrasal verb to pass away is a nice way to say die. and you can include photos and audio and video so that nobody has to think, oh, I wish I could hear dad's voice again, or I wish I could hear mum's voice one more time. So you can continue living forever on the internet. If you're interested in that, there's a link in the show notes.
Jose Alfredo, just one more thing that you touched on. It's related but slightly different to cryogenics and transhumanism. DNA manipulation. That worries me because that can affect people who are about to be born. In other words, babies. So we're talking about the very near future. I worry about the idea that some prospective parents might want to have a very, 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 very specific type of baby. And we're getting closer and closer to perhaps making that a reality. And I really don't like the idea of that. I do like the idea of DNA manipulation being used to eradicate terrible diseases, chronic diseases that make people's lives very difficult. But I really do worry about the idea of designer babies, as they say, because I think variety is the spice of life.
This would be similar to changing fruit and vegetables to make them perfect. So you'd give someone a perfect face or a perfect body.
Exactly. I mean, already they're kind of experimenting into this. There's a long way to go, but they're making progress in research, and that can be great as regards eliminating horrible diseases. But I, like Alfredo, I'm a bit worried that I hope it doesn't lead to designer babies, as they say.
It also sounds like something that might only be accessible to the rich or the very rich. So you'd get this widening gap between the perfect rich elite and the poor people who couldn't afford that, and it will be even more of a gap between classes.
Yeah. So that does worry me, Jose Alfredo, a little bit. I hope we don't go down that path.
Next, we have an email from Ronnie. Reza, what does Ronnie say?
Ronnie, who's Veronica Morfin, of course, she says, "Dear teachers Craig and Reza, it is nice to hear from you every morning. Your podcast is my cup of tea." That means it's suitable for her. She really likes it.
Or maybe she listens while she's drinking her tea.
Maybe it's a play on words, yeah. She also says, what would you suggest to improve a long distance relationship? Cheers, Veronica. Ooh, that's a good question.
That is. Have you ever had one? Have you ever had a distance relationship?
I have. I've had a couple and both ended disastrously. What about you?
Because of the distance or because of the partner?
No, probably the distance played a part, but maybe they would have ended anyway. I don't know.
Yeah. I've had a couple also, and they were quite positive, actually. Although when I had distance relationships, the way to communicate was only pen and paper. It was in the days before email, and I just wrote letters and occasionally spoke on the phone, and speaking on the phone was a really exciting thing. These days, of course, we have email, we have WhatsApp, we have Skype and video, voice over the internet. So it's much easier to keep in touch with people and maintain a relationship. 2 idioms occur to me, which are pretty opposite. So it'll be interesting to see what you think, Reza. Absence makes the heart grow fonder, which means if a person is not there next to you, you think more fondly of them. You think highly of them because they're not with you. So your relationship gets stronger. However, another one, which is the opposite, out of sight, out of mind. If someone's not there next to you, you don't think of them. They're not in your mind. They're not in your head. Which of those do you think is more believable?
I think there's truth in both of those sayings. Yeah, they're opposite, but they're both true. I guess it depends on the quantity. If you're distant from someone, but not excessively, you might simply grow fonder of them. You might want them more. But if it's excessive, if you spend years and years and years and years and you never see each other, you might lose that intensity.
Maybe it's a question of time. If it's a case of a few months, perhaps, then it could very well work. On the other hand, if you leave it too long without physically seeing your partner, then that perhaps could have a negative influence on your relationship.
I guess, listeners, you all have a distance relationship with me and Craig. I guess, in a way, platonic. Platonic means not lovers, not boyfriend, girlfriend, but we have a distance relationship. You guys know, I guess. I mean, some of you can can tolerate us every day. I'm sure others would go crazy. You think, oh, Craig and Reza again every day. It's too much. It's a question on your levels of tolerance, I guess.
Thanks for your question, Veronica. It's always a pleasure to hear from you. Next, another friend and alcoholic from Barcelona. It's Josep.
Hello, Craig. Hello, Reza. This is Joseph from Barcelona. And I just wanted to congratulate you both on such a wonderful achievement. 200 episodes. It's not bad at all. 4 years of teaching people in Spain and all over the world through the podcast system. It's really remarkable. So once again, congratulations, and all right. Hopefully you would be there for many years to come. I don't have any specific question. Maybe a short one about Mamen, our good friend Mamen, who I think she mentioned a few weeks ago that she would be going to work and live in the UK somewhere. And I was wondering if you guys knew anything about her. How is she doing in this position? If she has already left, and if so, how is the adaptation to a new life in a foreign country? And or I don't know, anything, any feedback. So, well, that's it. Thank you very much. And, looking forward to hearing you for many more episodes. Congratulations. Bye-bye.
Hi, Craig. Hi, Reza. How are you doing? It's been a while since I sent you a message, so here I am. I've been a bit busy, and finally I traveled to Brighton 2 weeks ago. I stayed with my lovely friend Amaya. It was fantastic. We spent a lovely time together. Incredibly, it was a sunny day on Saturday. We've been to the Brighton Pier, to the beach. We've been to a pub. We have a lovely time together. It was fantastic. Maybe I could send you another message telling you the funny things that happened to me all over the trip. So, well, I just also want to answer Josep from Barcelona. Let me say, Josep, that sadly I couldn't get the job to to go abroad, so I'm still living here in Viescas. I wish I could make it in autumn from this 2018. So I wish, let's see what the future brings to us. So thank you for asking, by the way. It was a nice thing. And well, I think that's all for now, guys. As always, you are fantastic. You're such a lovely guys. You know that I love you so much. So a big kiss and a big hug, guys. Ciao.
Well, first, let me say thank you, Josep, for your comments and questions and your compliments on the podcast. And congratulations to your wife, Rosa, also on her 50th birthday. And I know that Rosa now listens to us. So hello, Rosa.
Yes, thanks, Josep. And thanks to Mamen, of course, for your lovely answer to us and to Josep. We're sorry to hear you didn't get the job, but hey, you get to stay in Viescas, which is one of the greatest places in Spain, if not the world.
One of the most beautiful areas of the country. It really is. Just one thing, Mamen, you said in your message when you were speaking about Brighton, you said, we've been to Brighton Pier, we've been to a pub. It's in the past, it's finished, so it's better to use past simple. Better to say we went to Brighton Pier, we went to a pub. And I like the way you used wish. You said wish with the past tense. You said, I wish I could. But you said, I wish I could make it in autumn. Better to say, I wish I could do it in autumn. One more thing, Josep. I've recently received your message about your trip. Please record any future messages the same way that you record your latest one about the trip. It sounds much, much better. I don't know what you did with your audio with the last message, but it sounds very, very good. Usually your messages are peaked, they're very loud, but the last one you sent me about your trip is wonderful. So please do whatever you did, please do the same way. Do it the same way next time. Next, we have an email from Rafa Leon. What does Rafa say, Reza?
Good morning from Mexico. This is Rafael Leon again from Guadalajara, Mexico, land of tequila and mariachi. I have a great challenge for you for episode 200. In episode 131, Reza spoke very well in Spanish. Thank you. He said, "Es que yo mi primer año en España, yo no hablaba ni una palabra en español," etc. But I've never listened to you speak Spanish. I presume he's talking to you, Craig.
I think so.
And now this is the challenge, Craig. Could you speak Spanish for 10 seconds?
Ooh, well, I'll try. Maybe, Reza, you could listen and tell me if I make any mistakes, because I'm sure I will. Bueno, no sé qué decir. Esta mañana que comí para desayunar, he bebido café con leche, he comido un par de galletas esperando que viniera Reza. Ooh, that's a mistake, right?
No, it's right.
It's
Subjunctive.
right.
Wow.
Wow, fantastic.
Extra points.
I think that was 10 seconds and no mistakes, right?
Esperando que viniera Reza.
That was
correct use of subjunctive.
That was a guess. You know I usually make mistakes with my subjunctive
Me
in
too.
Spanish.
Me too. But wow. Correct use of subjunctive. What about that, Rafael?
I think Rafael is helping me to raise the bar of my Spanish. To raise the bar means to improve, to set a higher target for my Spanish. So thank you, Rafael. That's a great question. Next, we have a voice message from my friend Curro from Valencia, who is at the moment studying in Ireland. Hello, Curro. Let's hear his question.
Is there actually any differences between English people and Irish people? Like the way they speak and the way they are?
Oh, what do you think about that, Craig? Good question, eh?
Yeah, definitely the way they speak, because there are obviously the Irish accent, which is very different to the English accent. And there are some vocabulary differences and nuances in the language. Culturally, they're very different. They have a very different culture. I also think Irish people are friendlier than English.
Oh, well, that Craig said that, not me, eh? This is Craig.
But do you agree?
That's a big generalization.
Well, when I say friendlier, I mean more approachable, easier to speak to, just generally more open than the English.
Mm-hmm. I think you might be right there. Yeah. Although, of course, there are exceptions.
Yeah.
Many
I'm
exceptions.
generalizing.
But yeah, I think that I like the word approachable rather than friendlier. It's dangerous to use the word friendly. But I do think that on the whole, the Irish are very approachable. No Irish person tends to get, upset if you come over to them and try and start a conversation. Whereas in England, it depends. It depends. There are certain places and certain types of people where it's probably best not to bother them. I'm thinking above all of like big cities like London, and in a busy place at a busy time, if you try to strike up a conversation with someone you don't know, they might not really like it.
Yeah. I've only travelled in Ireland once. I went camping a few years ago and driving around for about 3 weeks in August. And every time we stopped to eat or go into a pub for a drink or stay at a bed and breakfast occasionally when it rained, everybody I met were friendly. They asked us questions. They smiled. They were very, very happy to see us. I can't imagine that in the UK, except maybe out in the countryside in small villages.
But that isn't necessarily a question of unfriendliness. I've thought a lot about this, and it might be just that the English character is a bit more reserved.
Exactly.
And it's not that they're unfriendly and they'd be happy to, help you if necessary, but they don't want to bother you, and they presume that you don't want to have to make the effort to bother them. It's kind of a bit like that, I think, with some people.
Yeah, that's true. Also, on the subject of culture, we have a question from Maite, comparing British culture with Spanish culture.
Hi guys, this is Maite from Xàtiva. I would like to ask you about your experience living in Valencia and the cultural shock that you experienced in these years. Well, that's it. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much for your message, Maite, and hello to all my friends and acquaintances there in Xàtiva, the soccer rats, as people call them here. And they're called soccer rats, by the way, because as we mentioned before, their city got burned. I could say to you, Maite, what makes people from Xàtiva different from the rest of the Comunidad Valenciana? They're kind of known to be a bit special. Yeah, you didn't support the king, so you could say that the rest of Spain are Borbonistas or whatever. They support the Bourbon family, and you don't. That makes you different in Xàtiva, eh? But that's another story. Let's not go back down that route.
Do you remember your first year in Spain and any cultural differences that affected you when you first arrived?
Eating hours. Now I've got used to it, but the times when people eat lunch and the evening meal much later in Spain. But I've grown to quite like it. At first, it was very strange, but now I think I prefer eating a bit later. What about you?
Yeah, me too. Also the drinking, not only eating, the fact that I could drink alcohol until the pub closed, not until a particular time, and then asked to leave, which used to be the case in the UK. I found kissing a big culture shock when I first came here. It took me maybe a year to feel comfortable kissing a female when I was introduced to her, because as you know, in the UK, we just shake hands perhaps when you meet a female or a male. And obviously in Valencia, you're introduced to somebody, oh, this is Amparo, and you kiss her on the cheek. And I found that very difficult as an Englishman to get used to. Also, the body language is very different. We've spoken about body language on a previous podcast, and the directness of the Spanish, which I like very much. The English tend to be sometimes too polite and too distant, but Spanish tend to be more direct, and you have a better idea of what the person means. They speak in a very direct way and a very informal way. I like the informality of Spanish and Valencianos. Something I dislike and that culturally still affects me today is the noise. Valencia is a very noisy city. I don't really like that. I don't like walking into a bar and hearing people shouting.
Yeah, but I think Spain in general has a culture of speaking quite loudly.
Yes.
In some parts more. In Valencia, probably more loudly than in Galicia. I'm stereotyping, but more or less. But I think generally in Spain, they speak quite loudly. I know in Dublin, when you see a bus full of Spaniards, it's a loud bus.
Yes.
And when they're French or German, it's quite quiet.
You can have two Spaniards standing next to each other or sitting next to each other, and they are shouting. Why are they shouting? They're sitting maybe 6-7 inches and they're speaking really, really loudly. And it's a cultural difference that I dislike.
Yeah. And you mentioned the informality. On the whole, I like it, like you, Craig. Mm-hmm. But there are a few things. Like I remember I was shocked the first time that a complete stranger wanted to grab my attention in Valencia. And perhaps it was in a bar where the waiter wanted to give me my change back or something like that. And he went, excuse the sound in the microphone, he went, shh. in Britain and Ireland, that seems really rude. You don't just do that to someone you don't really know. It seems rude, but people kind of go, oh yeah, shh.
Yeah, another cultural difference. Yeah. A similar question from Angelica Bello, who wants to know the original reason that brought us to Spain and what is keeping us here in Spain, and would we like to return to the UK eventually? Reza, you first.
Well, I just like the idea of Spain being a melting pot, a place where everything mixes, of cultures. It has such a long culture of important civilizations and religions. They've all come through Spain.
Is that why you came here originally?
That's one of the things, yeah. And also the weather, I won't lie. The fact that it's a Mediterranean country, the weather is very attractive. But, there's a long tradition of the Spanish conquistadores who went abroad and all the wealth they brought back, which is good and bad things, I realize. And you can see that in the architecture and the culture here. And then you've got the Arabs, the Moors, and their centuries of dominance here. You can still see that as well. The Roman influence, and the older, Celtic tribes. It's a real melting pot, and I find that very interesting. Mm-hmm. What about you?
Well, I first came here because of my family. My parents retired to Spain. They bought a house here together with my sister and my brother-in-law back in 97. And it could have been anywhere. They could have quite easily retired to France or retired to Italy, and I would have gone there. I did not expect to like Valencia and the Costa Blanca as much as I do. So I literally came here to be closer to them. I had been traveling around teaching around Europe for maybe 10 years before they moved here. So I wanted to be close to my family, and Valencia was the closest place to where they were living where I could find a job. So that's what brought me here, just to be closer to them.
And are your family keeping you here?
Yes, at the moment they are. There are other things that are keeping me here. For example, my work. I have a steady job and I like living here. I do. I mean, sometimes I moan or I complain about the negative things, but generally speaking, I do enjoy living in Valencia and in Spain. So at the moment, I'm not thinking of going anywhere else. I'm very, very settled here. To be settled means to be comfortable and happy in a place. Maybe that will change in the future, but maybe not. So at the moment, I'm happy here. So if I left Spain, though, I wouldn't go back to the UK.
But Craig, you just spoke 10 seconds of beautiful Spanish.
So yeah, maybe South America, maybe Argentina. If I did leave, I don't know. But what about you? Would you ever go back to Belfast permanently?
I don't know. I might. I keep an open mind, or South America, or another country in Europe, or whatever. I keep an open mind. Mm-hmm. I like Valencia. I like the Levante, this eastern coast of Valencia. But I'm open to suggestions in the future. Thanks for your question, Angelica. Very good question. And by the way, thanks to Angelica, who transcribes our episodes for the AIRCaholics on Patreon. Thanks very much for that, Angelica.
Yeah, thanks, Angelica. And you can join our AIRCaholics and receive the latest episodes transcribed by Angelica for as little as $1 per month. So go to patreon.com, that's patreon.com/Ingles podcast for more information, and show us some love over there on Patreon. Join our Patreon program.
And before we end this extra long, because it's a special edition, our 200th edition of Aprender Inglés con Res y Craig, we'd like to thank all our Patreon sponsors, starting with Bruno, our gold sponsor. Bruno, if you remember, does the walking tours of Copenhagen through his company, CopenhagenWalkingTour.com, where you can see the castle and other typical sites in Copenhagen in English or in Spanish. He also does a tour of the favelas and Rio in Brazil, which is led by local guides, so it's perfectly safe and it helps to improve the community. It brings a bit of money in for them. You can find out about that on favelawalkingtour.com.br. So thanks very much to Bruno.
Yeah, thanks, Bruno. And also thank you to our other wonderful Patreons who are supporting us and sponsoring the podcast. That is Ana, Dana, Pachi, Manuel, Juan Carlos, Beatriz, Pedro, Maite, Lara, Rafa, Nestor Garcia Mañez over at nestorgm.com, his podcast Luces Extrañas, Maria Lorena, Sara, Carlos Mamen, Juan Leiva Galera, Corey Finneran, whose podcast is at ivmv.com, Miren, Jose Luis, Agus, Mariel, Manuel Garcia, Raúl Rafael, Jose Manuel, Pilar, Gambate Blog, Igor, Ignacio, Kieran, Carlos, Ana, Marina, Ortiz Peña, and a lovely selection of our latest patrons. Thank you for joining. Juan Carlos Patin Fernandez, Joel Silvera, Alejandro Pluma, Alex Cuadra, José Emilio Villena, Emilio Manuel Martínez Rivas, Antonio, José Antonio Muñoz, Esperanza Colmenero. Thank you to all of you who are supporting us on Patreon.
Maybe you'd like to get in touch with us. You could send us a voice message to speakpipe.com/Ingles podcast, or send an email with a comment or a question to Craig@inglespodcast.com
or to Reza@belfastreza@gmail.com. And thank you to Patricia Alonso, who continues working hard transcribing episodes for you, and we put them on our blog. We now have episodes 1 to 20 and 131 to 142 over at inglespodcast.com. Thank you to everyone who has sent congratulations, questions, and who has celebrated with us for this 200th episode. It really has been a pleasure for us over these last 4 years and 200 podcasts to get to know you and to be helping you with your English. And I hope we continue for many, many years and podcasts to come.
Thanks very much to all of you. We wouldn't exist if you didn't listen to us.
Exactly. What's next week, Reza?
On next week's episode, poetry.
So join us next week for that. And until then, the music in his podcast is by Pitts. The track is called See You Later. It's goodbye from me.
And goodbye from me.